Okay, I want to introduce our special speaker here, Natalia Wright. She has more than 27 years experience, and she is currently working on her PhD at the University of Glasgow. Her interest is philology. I want to welcome her on behalf of TESOL Kuwait. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you so much. I can see somebody is already circling my presentation. Can I ask you not to mark it, please? Because otherwise I'll get lost. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone, and I hope you can hear me. If you cannot, please let us know in the chat. I am excited and grateful to TESOL Kuwait for the opportunity to share my experience and whatever I've learned over these years while I've been here. And the topic for today is glocalizing English language teaching materials. I was told that the chat is enabled, and if you do have any questions, if you would like to comment and respond, go ahead, and I'll keep an eye on that whenever possible. Okay. Now, the session outline today is as follows. We will look at the term glocalization. I'm sure you are familiar with that, but it would be helpful if we unpack it a little bit. And then after that, we will look at the two components in ELT and what local element means and what global element is in English language teaching. Then I will share with you how I came up with the need to adapt ELT materials and how I did it, how I glocalized the grammar teaching materials. Then I will share with you what I've learned from this process. And then any questions are welcome that I hope I'll be able to answer.
Please.
Do we have any questions?
Please mute. Excuse me, please mute your microphone.
I feel a bit like I'm in the pandemic situation. Remember when we all had to teach online? And that was the case constantly. Please mute, unmute your microphones. Okay, are we ready? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's continue. When I was thinking of how to approach this topic, I was preparing for the presentation, I couldn't find a better example than McDonald's. McDonald's company is a very good example of product localization, and there are some lessons that we need to learn from that and apply to English language teaching. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we all know that McDonald's has chains on every continent, right? Or almost on every continent. It operates in more than 100 countries. And product localization, that is adapting to local needs and tastes, plays a crucial role in their success and maintaining the competitive position in the market, and that they have done for the past 70 years. They managed to do that by adapting their menus to suit the cultural and socially accepted norms, tailoring their traditional products for the local audience with the specific requirements. And I've done a little bit of research, although and I hope you don't see it as me promoting McDonald's, but I personally tried it once or twice when I was hungry. But in the center, you can see the global version, let's say, of a chicken wrap. Sorry if you haven't had breakfast, guys. And it stems from the West, from the Western culture. And this is what I researched, how this product has been adapted for the local context. For example, in the context where I live is Kuwait. In Kuwait, we have chicken makarabia. I don't think that it exists outside the borders of the Middle East. Also, what I am not quite sure about whether or not it is represented in other countries. Maybe you will correct me by saying whether it is the case or not. But definitely here we have it. The chicken roll in China, it also consists of local elements that conform to the taste of local people. Maghreb chicken, and you might correct me, I'm not any good at Spanish, crujiente, I guess it's crujiente, it's crunchy, right? Should be crunchy, and bacon in Spain. And then Taiwan uses the wraps that, the chicken wrap that contains locally sourced rice. So the point I'm trying to make is whether or not you like McDonald's or you've ever tried it, their efforts to localize their products are commendable, and they should be recognized because they put a tremendous amount of their resources and R&D for the localized products. So that's creates global services and products. In this case, chicken wraps. Now, when we think of glocalization, the first thing that comes to mind is this person, Roland Robertson. The term, although this phrase refers to 1995, the term glocalization first appeared in Harvard Business Review in 1980. And it means the coexistence or co-presence of both universalizing and particularizing tendencies. In terms of products and services, it means the adaptation of globally marketed product services into local markets. And adaptation of a service or a product means that it is tailored to conform to local laws, to customs, customer preferences, etc. One of the examples of localization where global and local exist simultaneously is the adaptation of the steering wheel for the UK market, which is on the right. And then you probably know that Netflix does not broadcast the same shows or the same films all over the world. They differ according to different contexts. Now, when I think of glocalization, what comes to mind is what Robertson exactly said, that local does not exist outside the global. We can't really separate the two. And in fact, local is embedded or included within the global. And if you think of the context where I'm at, my students are a good representation of glocalization when they wear brands such as global brands, Gucci, H&M, and other brands. And then you can see that they combine them with their traditional clothing. If you think of globalization with regard to yourselves as English teachers, you are a global element in the classrooms because you carry the Western knowledge, the knowledge of English as a global language, yet the other part of you is localized, is a local part of you. It's your L1 language, the first language identity. And you are yourselves an intersection of global and local forces. Now, let's get closer to the ELT field and see, so what's global there? Now, if we juxtapose global and local, we see the global elements. I'm sure these are the ones that you are familiar with. For example, what globalization has brought about is the status of English as a global language, as a language of globalization, in which the world economy speaks. Philipson called it lingua economica. Globalization portrays the language as a, in Bourdieu's terms, as a symbolic capital that everybody needs to build for success in the global economy. And stemming from that is language standardization, when native variety is seen as a form. Globalization led to the international context where English is used as a medium of instructions, the English-only teaching environments, not only in higher educational context, but to schools as well. Prescribed teaching approaches, CLT stands for communicative language teaching, was also the part of the Western agenda to spread their influence. And then the language tests such as IELTS and TOEFL, Shohami frames them as a gatekeeping mechanism to keep the students, the non-native speaking students, from participation in the knowledge economy. And finally, proliferation of Western-based textbooks. Now, how can local compete with that? So local elements are languages that are specific to particular regions and community, developing to their own norms and standards. At school, English is used as a foreign or second language. The context, the teaching context utilizes culturally responsive teaching methods and their own assessment systems, such as, let's say, performance-based, and local, producing their own local teaching materials. Now, there are tensions here. How can we bridge the local and global when the global element outweighs the local? So on the one hand, we have English as a global language. English is promoted and presented as a key, as a gateway to success. So English language and culture as dominant, this is what globalization also brought about. Post-colonial thinkers, they call it the Western influence, the Western-based knowledge, or West for sure. And then on the other hand are the local elements, vernacular languages that are on the brink of being marginalized. And then local teaching materials. I'm not even talking about local textbooks. I think Only once in my lifetime I saw a locally produced textbook, which was not very popular for the reasons that I outlined. It was not global, so it didn't gain any success. And then English is not used for success, but just as a means for communication. In other words, for practical purposes. So from that perspective, local languages are seen as inferior. And again, in post-colonial thinkers' vocabulary, these are labeled as East. So how do we bridge the West and the East? It is very difficult because we're probably not at the point of the McDonald's localization yet. And there is no balance, at least from what I'm observing. From the global influence of the West, and I'm not going to talk about it because this is not the topic here, but stem various inequalities, the native and non-native teacher binary, monolingual bias, and all other fallacies that Philipson talked about. So how do we bridge? How do we perceive globalization? If we agree that it's a part of us that we cannot exclude, then maybe Robertson's view will be helpful here. At least it changed my mindset. So he suggests that instead of speaking of inevitable tension between the two, maybe it is possible to imagine them as two different sides of one and the same coin. So with this idea in mind, he posits that local cannot be quite pure, not anymore. It is embedded in the global. It is always constructed in part in response to the influences from the global. Now, why do we want to adapt, localize, if you wish, our textbooks? Again, the same issues persist. And these are not only my observations, but observations that come from research. Many, and I'm not generalizing, but many global textbooks, they are still attached to an idealization of native speaker norms and culture. They reflect the cultural and linguistic discourses that originate from the West. And again, talking about globalization, which is imbued with neoliberal values. And this is what some of the global textbooks promote: competition, individualism, consumerism. What is also true that many global textbooks, they depict globalization as a positive phenomenon, or shall I say only as a positive phenomenon. This is the case with the books that we're using, the Pathways. When I evaluated these books, I noticed that, for example, the topic about the future was associated with many new exciting opportunities. Or, for example, in the units on the world of work, the first future job was outlined as a foreign language expertise, as a knowledge in foreign languages. And then the second one was translation and interpretation services. So again, it's about English language being the hegemonic one. And then this was my major concern, the next point, that such books give little consideration to the socio-cultural context. And then, because I'm going to speak about grammar books, these books fervently follow a traditional Latin-derived syllabus, that is, the syllabus is itemized and structured in the order of acquisition, but not in tailored according to the needs of language needs of the students. Now, what I did and how I glocalized language grammar materials, I'm going to start with a little bit of context, just in case if people joined a bit later. I work at university in Kuwait, and I teach English at an English preparatory program. Preparatory program prepares students for their life in as undergrad students. It prepares them for their majors. It is an Emmy university where English only medium of instruction is present. I teach monolingual students with their primary language as Arabic. It is skill-based learning with all the skills that you see in parentheses being taught separately by separate instructors. And we use Anglo-American textbooks pathways for reading, writing, listening, speaking, and focus on grammar by Pearson for grammar. Plus, we produce a lot of in-house materials. What I looked at when I started being unhappy with the materials. Well, number one, I tried to check my understanding. Okay, am I really unhappy? What bothers me here? So evaluation comes first. I evaluated what the existing coursebooks and what we already have, assessed whether or not and how suitable they are for my students' needs and context. And then important was to decide, okay, what parts of the materials need localization? Because obviously we can't discard the global element, and I wanted to keep it in, but because there was so much of global, I wanted to shift the angle to the local. So what should be localized? Language, images, cultural references. And then the next step was that I did some research, and because I've been here for 6 years, it allowed me to make modifications and to adapt the materials in the way that you will see them. And next, I decided to adapt the language, because I teach students who are diverse in their abilities. And in one and the same classroom, we have students who are from A2 to C1 level. After that, I added the local element. I incorporated local content into materials, be it images, stories, examples, but the ones that reflect students' culture and experiences. I tested the materials because this was a crucial step, and it became possible because I teach 5 sections. So all 5 sections I teach, I had a chance to trial and then adapt, and then readapt again and trial again. When I approach materials development, I turn to many scholars, many writers, Tomlinson included. So because the lists are numerous, I came up with 6 shoulds. And I know that's not grammatically correct, but this is my invention. And the first premise was my target for the whole year. Materials should achieve impact, and impact is achieved when the learners are curious, when they demonstrate excitement and signs of interest and attention. Materials should help learners feel at ease. and there are many ways again. So the one that I looked at, the texts that students can relate with their own culture. Material should provide authentic language exposure. And I looked for the texts that are not adapted. I looked for the audios that were authentic. Materials should not rely too much on control practice. And that was also, in part, my worry, my concern, and my joy. According to Alice, control practice has little long-term effects on accuracy or fluency. So taking this principle, bearing this principle in mind, gave me some joy to experiment. But of course, we shouldn't forget, and this is what I also kept in mind, because the assessment followed the syllabus, I couldn't deviate from that. Materials should align with curriculum. And because I had certain points that were going to be tested and are going to be tested very soon, I had to keep that in mind. And then the last one with materials, when I created them first, I got upset a little bit that they didn't work well, or while thinking that what could have been done should have been done. But then materials shouldn't be prescriptive. They're not the straitjackets. They're not the imposition. They're only resources that we can utilize, we can adapt, and we can even ditch. Now, the first activity, and probably the most exciting part here, I will present a number of, let's say, lessons or lesson points that I adapted. So the first one is, the lesson was called, or the part of the lesson was called, how well do you know the avenues? And people who live in Kuwait, you would immediately know what I mean. So the avenues, for those of you who are not in this context, is a huge, I think it's the biggest mall. I might be mistaken, I haven't been there for a long time. It's the hugest mall where people go and where our students go to relax, to go shopping, and just for a walk. Now, my grammar point was the Rizdera, and the only material I used, the Avenues website. What I did, I posed the question, how well do you know the avenues? And then I asked the students to use the website of this mall, go there, do a bit of research, and answer the question. Now, I've done this activity myself previously, and that's why I knew exactly, and I predicted where it could go wrong. And I structured the questions in the way that are quite tough to get, because it required them to delve into the website and apply their search skills. So students wrote down their ideas, and then they shared their sentences. And after that, they came up with the rule for the structures, the Rizdera. And of course, you might say, well, some of the questions do not contain the Rizdera. That was purposefully done. I didn't want to use the structures that are artificially constructed, because in real life, we don't just speak in the Rizdera, right? So they had freedom to experiment with the language and to structure the sentences in the way that they feel comfortable with. But at the same time, I had some of the sentences that pointed them towards the grammar point of the lesson. It was quite interesting how the first question, when they shared their findings, again, there was some mismatch, because some of the students, they used Wikipedia, they used Google instead of the website. Also, what's another name for the marketplace? Okay, can I ask my colleagues in Kuwait, can you guess another name for the marketplace? Very few students got that. Yes, great, that's souk. Correct. Okay, well done, well done. Thank you so much. Yes, so they shared their findings, and there was one point when they were arguing with each other. And of course, you could see that some of these structures, they required the use of the preposition, where is it located, which was actually the next topic. And I was using this opportunity to bridge one to the other. It really worked, it worked well, really well. I was happy with that. The next point was present simple. And the overall materials that already existed, they were named the famous in Kuwait. And initially it started with the slide where, which portrayed a lot of famous people in Kuwait, and students came up with their answers, whether or not they can recognize them. I decided to take this a bit further, and I found a lot of texts, and I compiled them into one, the famous chef. And I created a handout about the famous chef, but he's famous now, not only in Kuwait, we're having a chain of restaurants all over the world. So first I asked them to make up questions, which was even unusual for myself. Make up questions on what you would like to know about him. The only thing they knew that he's a male. Okay, I didn't reveal, and he's famous and in Kuwait. So none of other information was given. So these are the questions they came up with. And then I gave them the handout for them to find answers. After that, I asked them to read the text again and answer the following questions. But before we go there, if you look at point number 2, this was also very interesting. Look at number 4, how tall is he? So students were interested in that. There was also a difference between the males and female sections, because I teach segregated classes with the girl sections posing a question, is he married? That was also a very interesting finding. Is he a good influencer? So these are questions that I did not anticipate, but I was happy to discover. Now, what happened next was that they came up with their findings, and these are the sentences that they devised based on the text. And here is the text itself. And later on, we started working with the sentences. So I asked them to look at the verbs in this, in number 5 set of sentences. What actions do they describe? Why do some verbs have SES endings and some don't? What is the name of the tense? In asking this question, I was aware, I knew full well that I'm testing the Vygotsky zone of proximal development. I'm pushing the knowledge boundaries a little bit, but I just wanted to see, first of all, how much they remember from their school programs, because this is surely for many or for most, this was not the first encounter with the present simple. Now, the next one was Alibaba and 40 Thieves. I decided to use the fairy tale or a legend from the local context. Initially, I thought I would use Aladdin, and then I thought I would go for something, let's say, less popular or less famous, or I thought so. First of all, students shared what legends, what fairy tales from their culture they know. Interesting enough, they named all the cartoon ones. So it also brought up this knowledge that is, or the lack or thereof, the knowledge of the local culture that is sadly missing. So maybe the great parents, they don't read these stories any longer, or maybe it's been overtaken by the global context that is staring at us from our TV screens and from the books. So they were familiar with the past simple. I used the story or the fairy tale in order to practice the usage of regular, irregular forms of past simple. So I gave them the beginning of the fairy tale, asking them to fill in the gaps. And after that, I suggested that now they should create a story. The story was not the whole paragraph, but I wanted 5 or 8 sentences just to see the succession of actions, whether or not they do remember. I didn't give them the text, and I asked them not to find the story online, because that would nullify the whole point of the exercise, and wouldn't be unfair towards other students. One task that I said that it should use the past tense, both regular, irregular, and I gave them the slide just to help them out a little bit with the vocabulary. Also the pictures that acted as visual prompts. And after that, they presented their stories on Padlet. So this is the result. These are the stories that came up with, and you can see exactly how they implemented the task with, I think most of these stories utilizing the correct forms. It gave me the chance to see what I have to take away from this lesson on the past simple as a teacher. And you can see many use the vocabulary that I placed with the mentioning Kasim and weighing machine and the word selfish. What also came interesting here is the reaction to the story, which is not really relevant to the grammar point, but overall evoked a heated discussion with regard to the death of Ali Baba's brother Kasim. And the story goes, and again, I checked many sources that, all of the fairy tales, they usually end in, they lived happily ever after. So one student responded, "Miss, how come they lived happily ever after if his brother is dead?" So that also made me aware of the sensitivity that I need to develop while approaching these topics, while localizing materials, choosing the relevant sources. And also I've learned something from that about my students. Now, the next one was on the future. I called it Discovering the Future, although there were 2 points, will and going to. According to Bolaitha and his idea of holistic grammar teaching, there are only ways of expressing the future, not the future tense per se. So for that, I thought I would really want to glocalize. I would really like to use the 2 elements. So the first audio, which was aimed at the students' discovery of the future ways of expressing, the future. So I found a conversation of the native speakers where they exchange opinions about the future. And then I asked the students to note down the sentences that the speakers used. So these were the sentences. Interestingly, the number 4 structure, I'm just about, it didn't come as a surprise to students. So obviously this is a structure that is widely used in informal English, and students were quite familiar with that. The local elements was the audio of Isa Ramadan. He's a local weatherman and he's very famous, and I listen to him every single day in my car. His weather forecast, that was very difficult to find. I only discovered one YouTube audio, and I didn't want to adapt it. I used it as is, and it didn't go really smoothly. So the task was the same. Please note down the ways of expressing the future. Why it didn't go smoothly? Well, the audio was very long. It was over 3 minutes, and I could virtually feel that the students' enthusiasm wearing off. So the students couldn't keep up with their concentration. And luckily, they let me know. They said, "Miss, but it's too long, we cannot." And then the audio was authentic. It was unadapted and fluent. The pace was very fast and contained the periods when the speaker mispronounced some or swallowed some words. So that was really tough. So after this failure, with the help of my team leader who attended my class, luckily, I provided the students with the audio transcript, and I shortened the audio, audio file itself. What you see is the third adaptation. Initially, the lines were not numbered, and also when I asked students to call out their structures, I kept saying where. So I got lost within this text, within the pool of the sentences. And then again, the team leader suggested that why don't you number them? So another pair of eyes is always beneficial. So the students helped me work out the names of the regions. And that was because I was particularly interested in their engagement and how localization works to suit that purpose. I was very surprised that first of all, the student did some research and verified that the names of the regions that I used, they were all correct, because obviously I'm not familiar with them. And then the use of the transcript made the activity suitable for visual learners, and finally it worked well. And then the last one happened 1 week before Ramadan, and it was focused on the toughest topic ever, gerunds and infinitives. Again, I wanted to bridge global and local. I didn't want to strip the context of the global element. So first, I presented the statements that already contain gerunds and infinitives, and asked the students to decide whether they're true or false. And after that, I presented the text. And I said, okay, this is what I found in the official sources, which I did. I couldn't keep the authenticity of the text from the official website, one of the websites, because I had to incorporate the verbs. I had to incorporate these gerunds and infinitives. So what students did again is a guided discovery activity where they notice the patterns of verb plus ing or verb plus to. But it didn't end here. After that, I presented the similar text, but about the way Ramadan is celebrated in Russia, in my home country. The problem here was that it was exactly the same task. And again, with the help of the observer, I adapted it and structured it as a practice activity. So the students, not only was the task to fill in the gaps, but also I wanted to hear their opinions, whether or not they knew that so many people in Russia celebrate Ramadan, and that pronunciation of Ramadan in our language, which is Ramazan, is very close to the Arabic way of saying it, Ramadan. So that was also a discovery. Some of the food that is cooked usually traditionally for Eid, chak, we found an alternative here as well. We found an analog here as well. And later on, I went and I checked it out in the shop. And then after that, we used the internet. I used Mentimeter a lot, where the students took a QR code and did some research on the internet to discover about Ramadan in other parts of the world. The focus was, if possible, to use gerunds and infinitives, but as you can see, it was not possible in all the cases. And I realized that's a very tough task, and maybe next year, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use these sentences or student sentences and ask them to rework them later on with the idea of using gerunds and infinitives in mind, again, where possible. And then maybe here the last point or the last adaptation. Of course, all these materials, localization, glocalization, it does require an immeasurable amount of time. But I was also thinking if I can do some small insertions, and this is what I came up with. So, for example, to practice the topic countable, uncountable nouns, I use photos around the campus, in particular this one. It was next to the classroom where I taught, so an idea dawned onto me, and basically that was an activity out of the pocket, as I call them. So the students were asked to sort the nouns into the following categories. I use it as actually as a warm-up before going into another area of countable and uncountable nouns. So these are some of the words, because I know this is too small and you can't see very well from the slide. So words, mentioned words like water bottles, straws, tissue, papers, and I had to sort them out into 3 categories. For example, the last category, both, was quite tough to decide, and I did ask why paper belongs to both. I should have written papers as well. So they come with their explanations, because they already encountered this topic. We already discussed how some of the nouns can be countable and uncountable. So what lessons have I learned? Always bear in mind the language level. We cannot assume that they know. Some of the words were quite tough. Students didn't know some of the vocabulary, so we need to anticipate this sort of challenges. Make sure the tasks are appropriately challenging, but not too difficult, which was in case of Isa Ramadan's weather forecast. That was really difficult and discouraging, even for me. And then when looking for the context, make sure that they're culturally sensitive, avoid stereotyping, misinterpretation, misrepresentations, and there are a lot of taboo topics in many contexts in teaching environments like here. So we have to consider that as well. It is time consuming. I spent probably 5 hours on looking for the audio for weather forecast because I wanted it to be in a language that is a non-native. So be prepared on doing that as well. Plus material adaptation requires time. And do not expect the students' engagement if you're not motivated enough. Only because you created materials it doesn't mean that they're interesting to students. You need to trial out your activities, if possible, on one group of students, and then apply a chain of modifications and transformations until you're entirely happy with it. And then maybe the point that is very important, we can't discard the global. There is no need to localize everything that you meet in the book. There is no need to criticize everything that is there. There should be a fair balance of global and local materials. In other words, glocalization. Now, if we look again at what is global in LT and how it can be adapted, how it can become global, English is seen as a language of localization, as a language of lingua franca, in which most of the world speaks. It acknowledges the diversity of English and linguistic repertoires, not only ours, not only students, but ours as well. Translanguaging plays a part in it, which is using the L1 language in code switching, code meshing. There are many names for that. English is an international language, not as a medium of instruction. And then what is surprising that Comoro de Vilio, 20 years ago, precisely, announced that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to language teaching and learning. We are now in the beyond methods era. So we need to experiment and find the ones or the one that is suitable to our students. It promotes a more inclusive and equitable assessment system. Here I'm struggling a bit because I cannot find a way to localize assessment because of the measurable outcomes that students have to arrive at. And then locally produced textbooks. So from locally produced materials to locally produced textbooks. And again, the nature of English is changing. Look at the picture of Kachru's concentrical circles, spread of English that was created by him in 1985, where the native speaker is at the center of authority and superiority. And look how things change now. English has traversed the borders of the three circles. It leaked outside it's the borders. It created a complex linguistic hybrids. So our classrooms are contact zones where we negotiate our hybrid, diverse linguistic identities. Also, what is interesting here, look how the role of English has changed over what, almost 40 years. And you can see now that it gave rise to many Englishes, many varieties. These are just some of them. What also became obvious in Martin's research, that is the representations of the same concentrical model in the Philippines, where the inner circle or a standard English is used by the elite layers of population. And then the next one, outer circle, is spoken by the middle class. And then the last one, the expanding circle, English is represented by people that are not as educated as others. So we have to bear that in mind. And the last point, and we're reaching the end I'm making, is that the glocalized future of TESOL is possible by recognizing our diversity of our learners. We need to adapt global teaching materials as we need to meet the needs and the interests of local clientele, local people, local students. That requires incorporating local elements, that is culture, language, and I didn't speak about using L1, but it is a part of it. Also encouraging critical thinking and reflection on the role of English in global and local contexts, developing intercultural competence alongside language proficiency, emphasizing communication and understanding over adherence to standardized language norms, and viewing language teaching and learning as a dynamic and ever-changing process. What is also true that this type of pedagogy, if we are to adopt it, it is not very comfortable. It is quite unnerving for teachers who have been trained to be more directive in achieving measurable outcomes. That is not my point, and never was, and never will be. My pedagogy adopts more indirect outcomes, and here I aim to be, along with my students, a lifelong learner, and therefore I'm very patient to see the outcomes. The proficiency might not bring immediate results or visible results, but it will come along, I'm sure. Also, I understand that we need to prepare our students for the problems of globalization, which are unpredictable. We have to become learners with our students of varieties of English, of new genres of communication, how to negotiate language diversity in the classroom, which view are we promoting in the classrooms? Because if you think of the global view, and that posits that language learning, that English is a key to success, is a key to participation to world economy. But again, we cannot always adhere to these assumptions because these are not true. Language knowledge alone does not guarantee success in life, and we know that. So this is pedagogically honest way of saying, of preparing students for the diversity of the world, especially now for the realities of the world in view of world Englishes. And instead of giving them a false hope that they will succeed in communication just after a couple of months or 1 year of the language course. So maybe in this case, whatever I've shared with you, and in view of all these realities that are apart, that coexist, the global and the local, with the same importance, maybe then the glocalized future of TESOL is possible. That's it. I finished. Do you have any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for such an informative session. I don't know if you were able to go through the chat box as we're going through the session, but everyone's sending in positive comments, like very informative and very useful. And a lot of questions came in regarding if they can, by any chance, have your email so they can ask for some of the details.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was also going to share the book proposal that I'm co-authoring, the book that I'm co-authoring with my colleague. And if you would like to participate in the edited book, Glocalized Approaches to Learning and Teaching English, you can get in touch with me. Also, the references are there for you if you want to have a look. I did post Instagram profile because I didn't know whether or not it is allowed. I'm going to type in the chat the email that you can contact me at, and it is personal, not Glasgow, because I'm finishing my doctorate next year and they will take it away from me. So that's why personal email works better.
Wonderful. So for all the participants who are asking for Natalia's email, kindly check the chat box. Kindly also note that we will be using the Zoom records to be sending out your certificates. Kindly remember that you have to attend at least 45 minutes of the session to obtain the certificate. So if you have stayed on for 45 minutes, you will receive your certificates via email, don't worry. For those asking about membership, kindly use our website. We do usually post information regarding membership, what spots are open. So please do that. And for those who missed any part of this session today, kindly remember that we do have a YouTube channel, so kindly use the YouTube channel to go over any of our lectures and webinars. Again, Ms. Suad, there's no Riyadh, no evaluation form to fill out for today. We will simply use the Zoom records to send out the certificates. Thank you all very much. Natalia, thank you for a wonderful, wonderful session.
Have
Wishing
a lovely
you all
weekend,
a
everybody.
Wonderful day.
Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to connecting with you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Again, thank you so much, Natalia. Thank you, Dr. Reem. And we will be putting up a recorded session on our website under webinars. Also, just Google TESOL Kuwait on YouTube and you will find us. Again, thank you. You will receive your certificates by tomorrow if you were here for 45 minutes. Again, thank you.